Okay, so good afternoon, good morning, and good evening to everyone across the globe. And thank you so much for joining this session. This is a session I'm really excited about. So first of all, to introduce myself, my name is Nazim Chaudhary. I've been with iBwave for about 15 years now, and throughout iBwave, I've had various different roles. But typically, one of my key mandates has always been creating standardization for carriers, for enterprises, and really, this is also what gets me excited about this iBwave product that I'm going to present today. Because it really revolves around leveraging data for standardization. So thank you all for joining. I'm going to jump right into it. Again, the topic today is really how we're going to be able to really transform wireless management, design, and survey in the cloud. And really the way I like to look at it is how do we start looking at data as something that's really actionable? So typically a lot of times data is looked at something as you archive, but there's a lot of power in data. And even when you look at the industry today, it's very synonymous that our whole job is really how do we support transporting data, and data is essentially the fuel for automation. And this is what I want to really start focusing on in this presentation as well, and start showing you how you could leverage data to make your lives more efficient and how it could really fuel automation within your day-to-day work tasks as well. So I'm going to jump right into it. So the way I customize this session is I really focused on some key areas. So there's a lot of features and functionality within Unity, but I want to really give a targeted approach to show you some of the key aspects that will really make your lives easier. So jumping right into it, really about talking about how do we empower data. And the reason why we want to empower data is because being in this industry and in this organization for so long, we've seen a lot of issues within all our clients across the entire ecosystem. So whether you're an OEM, whether you're a system integrator, whether you're a carrier, and they're very common themes of issues that we see, especially alongside when it comes to data. So first of all, it becomes hard to collaborate. So when I say collaborate, it's across internal teams, sometimes with external teams. There's different systems, different tools, different platforms involved. This is a point I was kind of mentioning earlier in my introduction. Data is often treated as something that needs to be archived, when in reality, there's so much power behind data, so much power to be leveraged for automation. And I like to tie this to being synonymous to our industry today. Like a lot of the automation we're seeing that we're enabling through connectivity is really to push data from one end to another, pushing it in real time, pushing it with the right latency, pushing it with the right connectivity. But at the end of the day, it's data that's fueling this automation. Data is telling task A to go to task B and such. The next point is also there's so many different tools involved when it comes to data, and really tools involved when it comes to your deliverables as well. So there's often, after you're done the design, you have to go and take it to a different platform. So I might have to take it to Excel, I might have to take it into a PowerPoint, I might have to use AutoCAD, I have picture documentation. So there's various different tools involved, and it creates inaccuracies. And usually when there's different sources of data, that causes inaccuracies as well. But it's also very difficult to create standardization when you're working with 5 or 6 different tools, which is really my next point and my final point as well, is there's lack of standardization. And this creates logistical challenges because you're working with different tools, but at the same time, as an organization, you want to make sure that at the end of the day, the outputs are the quality that you want to deliver to your end client. So whether it's a carrier, whether it's an enterprise, you want to make sure that it has the proper standardization. So taking all these challenges in mind, I want to show you essentially how we could leverage data to simplify these issues and really leverage Unity as a platform to really make your lives easier, whether you're a designer, whether you're a surveyor, whether you're a project manager, or whether you're a carrier as well. So and really it revolves around these 4 pillars of data. So we want to make sure that your data has integrity. So whatever data is going inside your design and going into your internal systems, it's going to have accuracy. We want to make sure it's complete. So we're following the methodology of a digital twin. So essentially at the end of the day, we're consolidating as much relevant information and as much live as-built information of your venue as possible. So when I say as-built information, think of all the data required in a design. So there's survey data, there's ROM data, there's design data, there's outdoor data. So making sure that you're continuously building this digital twin to have that data completeness. So this is also going to be a key focus of my presentation today. So data actionability. So how do you use complete data sets to really drive automation? So tasks that typically take 4 to 6 hours, how can we leverage data, make it actionable, and really reduce manual intervention or manual tasks that really take these long periods of time? And finally, the last point I want to talk about is data representation. So a key aspect is, how do we want to represent this data? How do we want to visualize our buildings? How do we want to visualize all the layers of that data that we actually captured as well? So I'm going to jump right into it, and I want to show you what this means live. So the first thing I want to talk about is this Unity cloud platform, and really the concept behind it is really, how do we build up this digital twin? And at the same time, how do we make our lives as engineers, designers, surveyors, project managers easier as well? So I'm going to take you through a step-by-step approach. So the first step is really, once you subscribe to this cloud-based platform, what you have the ability of doing is really starting to configure your environment. So when I say configuring your environment, it's really about how do you start defining what your outputs should look like, what your KPIs should look like, what your designs and deliverables should look like for your end client. And it could be multiple end clients, so you have the ability of creating multiple different templates. But also, as a starting point, you could start configuring your environment with data at hand. So let's say you have, let's say this year you want to target 20 different sites. You already have information about these sites. Maybe it's the address, maybe it's the locality. So it's really about pre-populating that information and taking that pre-populated information and driving it through into your workflow. So the next step is really, if you're working on multiple projects, or if you have an organization with maybe 1 engineer, 2 engineers, 10 engineers, what's essential is, at the end of the day, everyone is connecting to the same equipment database. So let's say you're working for a carrier as an example, and they have their own approved antennas, their own approved remotes. So you need to make sure that you're only designing with those approved equipment. So you have the ability of standardizing your equipment database. So anyone in your organization is pointing towards that same standard database that is approved for your end client as well. So the next step is, when you connect to this cloud-based platform, what you have the ability of doing is also standardize what a site survey looks like. So you could define a site survey, what you need to capture in that site survey, and you could also create customized checklists in your site survey. So again, if you're using the survey tool, you could associate predefined checklists. So I'm doing a site survey, I need to capture these 10 items. And it's not, a survey is not only about capturing RF measurements or capturing measurements from a scanner, it's also about capturing information like occupancy, what are the use cases I'm trying to support. So you really have the ability of customizing these checklists directly from this cloud-based platform. The next step is leveraging the environment. Like I was mentioning before, you could really start customizing what these outputs look like. So I could standardize what a deliverable looks like for carrier A. I could standardize what a deliverable looks like for carrier B. I could standardize what a deliverable looks like for carrier C. So through this cloud-based platform, we could really start defining what an output should look like. And most importantly, by the click of a button, I could automate those deliverables for that carrier. So instead of taking 4 to 6 hours going to PowerPoint, Excel, a conglomerate of different tools, I could really just click on a button and start automating all these deliverables. And really, I could create as many templates as I want. So when I say multiple templates, it could be a template for a carrier, it could be a template for a site survey, it could be a template for an as-built, it could be a template for a complete closeout package. So really, the power is, by the click of a button, I could not spend 4 to 6 hours of manually creating these deliverables, but really create a deliverable in the standard of what my end client is expecting out of me. So not only is it important in terms of aesthetics, think also about the KPIs for your end client. So let's say you're working for public safety and they have a requirement of I need neg 95 coverage for 100% of the venue or 90% of the venue. You can enforce these KPIs, and this cloud-based platform, essentially what it's going to do is it's going to tell you, yes, you are meeting these KPIs and this design is actually sound. So you have a level of verification to ensure that the quality is compliant with your end client, whether it's for public safety or whether it's for carriers. Carriers have so many different KPIs with regards to RSRP, SINAR, RSSI, so many different KPIs are required, but you could have the system validate that all these are actually met. So think if you're a manager and instead of having to review every single design, you could have the system do a first level of verification for you, or even a full verification for you, and even spit out a report saying, yes, this meets all these KPIs meant for carrier A or meant for this public safety design. So this first half that I showed is really about how do you make the lives of a surveyor, a designer easier. But the second half, what I want to show is what's happening in the background in the cloud. What's happening in the background is this digital twin is being populated. So it's extrapolating all the information from your design, from your survey, from all the information that you've been creating through your workflow, and it's populating this digital twin in the background. So as you log into this web-based platform, you could start seeing this digital twin populate. So this is no work on the designer's end. The system is automatically populating this digital twin for you. Now, once you have this digital twin, you could leverage it for several different factors. So if I want to leverage this digital twin for analytics, I could start creating various different reports just to understand better what's going on in the venue. And I could create analytics not only for a single venue, but I could create analytics for every single venue I have in my venue. So you could have individual reports per project, but you could also have global reports for every project that's currently in your environment. So think of an example. Let's say I want to see everywhere I've deployed maybe Ericsson radio dots. That's a type of report that I could essentially generate and see exactly where I've actually deployed them. The last part I want to mention is while you're connected to this platform, you're consistently having this digital twin that is pulling in latest information. So at the end of the day, when it comes to having to maybe maintain the network, or maybe you need to have an addition, instead of doing a whole new design, you could take a layered approach of, okay, what does it look like if I add a new small cell in this new extension of a building? Or what if I have to do a rip and replace? So it becomes much easier to not have to do a whole new design, but take a layered approach of adding a new equipment or even adding a new technology. And last but not least, all the data that's in this platform is interoperable. So if you have internal tools, let's say you have a geospatial platform you want to pull this information into, or even if you're using SharePoint, or even if you're using Salesforce and you have specific data you want to pull into, all this data is available for you to pull in. So this is kind of a quick highlight of what I want to talk into, but I'm going to jump into the demo right now and just show you how this could actually work. So the first thing I really want to show is this, essentially this data-driven workflow. Okay, so just to kind of show you how this data-driven workflow looks like, so really what the workflow I was showing. So right now I'm in this Unity environment. Now, the first task I want to do is, this is kind of a one-time thing. What I want to do is start configuring all the essential data sets that are required throughout my entire workflow. So it could be occupancy information, it could be any information that's going to be relative to your venue. And all this data is what essentially you want to capture throughout your site survey, and you also want to leverage for automation in your design. So once you complete that data, that information trickles down into your other tools. So what I'm showing you here now is I configured my environment with the data I need. Now when I come into my site survey tool, I have these checklists that allow me to also capture that data as well. So I come into my survey tool, I could see that information that's being captured, that needs to be captured. So as a surveyor, my job becomes much easier because already I see the projects that are assigned to me, but I also have checklists of everything that I need to capture, whether it's locality, whether it's occupancy information and such. So this is where it trickles down into the survey information. But next I want to show you what it looks like from a design tool. So think of yourself as a designer. I'm starting my design from scratch. And now what I'm doing is I'm leveraging all that information directly into a template. So as you saw in the initial video, what I did was I populated ones everywhere. All these ones are trickling down into my design. So this allows me to start a project from scratch, but leverage all the data that I had pre-populated or that I captured from my site survey. And what you see on the right, this is Unity that's actually embedded into design as well. So it allows me to make sure that all those relevant information data fields that I configured, whatever I type in here is going to be populated in this form as well. And one point I want to make real quick here is all this data that we pre-populated, it could also be populated through APIs. So if you have an internal tool that already has this information, essentially you could configure it so that data is pulled in here directly. And if it's pulled in here directly, it's going to be pulled into these intelligent forms here as well. So it's another level of automation. The other form is we also have Excel scripts. So if you have an Excel sheet of specific data, you could import that data, and that data is going to be leveraged into your design templates as well. And the other part I just showed as well is if it's captured in the survey, it's also going to be populated in these intelligent forms here. So another point I just really want to mention is what you see here. These are intelligent forms associated to a template. So I created a very generic template here, but you could create a template in any form you like. So in this generic form, I put a cover page, I put site identification, coverage requirements, but you could customize what this template looks like for you. It doesn't have to be what you see here. You could customize whatever these outputs look like and whatever these data fields look like, because at the end of the day, it's mapped back to the Unity platform. So whatever is populated in that cloud-based platform is going to be pulled into your actual design. Now I want to show you why this becomes very, very valuable, because essentially what we're doing is we're leveraging data for automation purposes. So I'm taking all the data in, I'm pre-populating everything that needs to be pre-populated. So I don't have to go back to Excel, I don't have to go back to PowerPoint. And essentially what I can do now is I could really start automating various different templates. So just to show you a quick example, instead of, I'm going to create a template for a closeout package. So instead of going back to PowerPoint or going back to Excel, I'm leveraging this data to really drive that automation and essentially spit out a report in a format for my end customer. So again, this is just an example format, but this is a format that can be customized to your end deliverables, and you can create as many templates as you'd like. This is just a sample template that I want to show you, but essentially what it's going to show you is it's consolidating all that information and packaging a report, so I don't have to go back to PowerPoint. So just by the click of a button, it's taking in that data, it's populating your deliverable, and it's creating a template out of it for your end client. So here's just an example template. You could customize these templates with scope of work documentation. These fields are being populated from the data at hand. And it's creating essentially a very clean and aesthetic package. So it's very different than the reports that you typically generate in iBwave, because this is a catered custom template. And you can see it's pulling in different information because it's a closeout package. So documentation you had in your site survey, RF information, prediction information, site survey information, access point information. So it's creating a consolidated report for you, and it's customized in a template for your end client as well. So if you want to put in costing information, you can as well, access point information. So the end goal is, how do we leverage data to drive this automation so I don't have to go back to Excel, I don't have to go back to PowerPoint, and I could just click that button and generate this template. And like I was mentioning before, you could create various different templates. So if I wanted to create, let's say, just a simple survey template, I could do that as well. So here I have a survey template instead. So again, I customize this template just to highlight what's relevant in an actual site survey. And these are just examples. So again, I just want to make it clear you could create as many templates as you want, really depending on your organization. And all these templates are going to be available to any engineer in your organization who's connected to the cloud. So it becomes easily accessible and easily available, which is the goal at the end of the day. So you want to make sure that your organization is delivering standardized outputs and outputs that also have the quality and the design requirements that are needed. So this is kind of the first feature that I really want to highlight. It's really about how do we leverage data to make our lives easier. And this next task is, I just want to quickly show you. So after I'm done my design, as an engineer, I could save it back to the cloud-based platform. And essentially what's going to happen here is it's going to ensure that at the end of the day, your design is going to be compliant. And often cases, you may want to make sure that your designers also have these mandatory fields that must be captured. So you could start defining these mandatory fields, and it's going to make sure that the engineers populate these mandatory fields. And if they don't populate these mandatory fields, it could essentially prevent them from uploading. But these are criteria that you could set in motion. So if you don't want to prevent it, that's fine. But if you want to give them a warning, you could do that as well. But if you really are adamant that, hey, you need to add the building's address before submitting a project, then you could actually enforce that as well. So that was the first part I want to show. And essentially, I want to show this kind of data-driven workflow. So instead of starting from scratch, what I'm doing is I'm leveraging information at hand. And if I don't have all that, if I don't have all the information, I could capture some of that information in the site survey. And going back into design, if I'm still missing information, I could start typing it in directly in Unity, and it's going to be imported into my forms through those intelligent forms. And at the end of the day, it allows me to create these package reports that really saves me as an engineer essentially 4 to 6 hours per project based on our clients' feedback, going back into PowerPoint, going back into Excel, and creating an output for their end clients. So that's the first demo I want to show you. The next demo is really about quality control. So not only do you care about the aesthetics of the report, what's also important is that these designs are meeting the KPIs for your end clients. So something I want to quickly show as well in this video is 2 factors. The first factor I talked about was at the end of the day, you want to make sure that if you're a single engineer or if you have 10 engineers, you want to make sure that you're all using a common equipment database. So when you connect to the cloud, it's going to make sure that you're all connected to that singular database. So no one is using equipment that shouldn't be used for a specific carrier, or if it's a public safety design, at the end of the day, it's going to make sure that you're using the equipment that should be used based on who your end client is. So that's the first task. This is kind of the task I was showing before, but I just want to dive a little bit more into detail. So again, this is where a validation takes place before submitting your design. So first of all, it's going to validate the equipment that's being used. It's going to validate if the custom fields are going to be used, but most importantly, it's going to validate that all your design KPIs are actually met. And here you can see I have a design KPI that's not met. And I'm going to leverage a package report again, just to kind of emphasize this. So I have this package report, and it's showing me, hey, these design criteria are not met. So I needed a signal strength of maybe -95 for 90% of the time, and that was actually not met. So it's saying, no, these are not compliant. So you could leverage this cloud-based platform to prevent an upload because this design is not meeting the criteria for your end client. So whether it's for a public safety design, whether it's for a carrier, it's going to prevent the upload if you choose to enforce that preventative measure. But it becomes a quick way of validating that, hey, this design is not ready for submission. You should go back to floor 1, fix the issue there, go back to floor 4, fix the issue there for your compliancy criteria. So again, you could see that, hey, I had a target of -90 and it was not met. So it really pinpoints where I need to actually fix these issues. And I can go and fix those issues and then really submit my project after I fix them. So again, the first video was more about your outputs. The second video was more about making sure that there's quality in your design for your deliverables. And Unity Cloud essentially allows you to automate the first and enforce the second if you choose to do so. So I want to split this video up into two parts. So the first part was really how to make the designers' lives easier using automation and leveraging enforcement rules to make sure that my design quality is meeting the standards for my clients. But the second aspect is what happens in the background in the cloud. So what's happening in the background is this digital twin is being populated. And these digital twins really give you that data advantage at the end of the day, because kind of going back to the point that I was mentioning before, it really allows us to take a layered approach. So think about the traditional process. So I may do a 4G design today, and later down the line, I'm going to do a whole new design for 5G. Later down the line, I'm going to do a whole new design for Wi-Fi. So the traditional approach is you do a whole new design for each technology. But what a digital twin allows you to do is it allows you to take a layered approach. So I did a 4G design today, and 6 months down the line, I could leverage my 4G design and see what a Wi-Fi layer looks like on top of it. So I could see how these technologies interact with each other. I could also see how the cabling and equipment room could actually accommodate for these different technologies. So it gives you a much more cohesive process in designing new technologies and a much more seamless process. So I don't want to have to do a whole new Wi-Fi design if I already have a design for 4G. I'd rather just take a layered approach and implement Wi-Fi. And this becomes very important when you start looking at private networks, because private networks themselves are taking a much more of a roadmap approach. Like maybe I'm going to deploy 4G in my entire building today. I may deploy 5G in the parking lots tomorrow, and I might deploy Wi-Fi in the conference room in 6 months. So it becomes a much more easier way for private networks to really plan out the roadmap for their overall network and really make sure that they could accommodate that roadmap and make sure that they're making the right decisions and technology choices for the use cases that they're trying to drive at the end of the day. So I really want to jump into that and show kind of what it's looking like in the background. So we saw the designer's perspective, but when we come back into the Unity platform, this is where all the data is being consolidated. So essentially all the data is being pulled, extrapolated, and consolidated. So I could see all that information firsthand. And this goes back to the information I'm capturing from the very beginning. So those custom fields are going to be there. The survey information is going to be there. The design information is going to be there. So I can click on a venue and have all that information extrapolated for me to see. So I don't have to go through individual iBwave designs to see what's going on inside a building. I have all this information exploded to me at hand. And I have different views of the venue as well. So if I wanted to see more of kind of that digital twin view, I could also take a look at that as well. So just to kind of show you what that looks like, I can essentially go back to, and before I jump into that, I forgot to mention, you could also see essentially all the wireless services there, all the technologies that you deploy. And then you could also have that graphical representation that's being built in the background. So this digital twin representation of your venue, geocoded of where it actually belongs on a map. And it gives you this live representation of that actual building. So as you can see here, this was a hotel environment. It was a conference hotel. And I could essentially see the building contour. I could see all the information related to that building. I could see the latest cabling. I could toggle over any of this equipment and see what is actually deployed there. So again, the concept is having a digital replica of what's there in the actual venue. I could see various different information with my equipment, if I want to see surface areas, if I want to see prediction areas as well, and really have the ability to have this digital representation of that venue directly on here. Now think of different use cases. So even if you have, let's say you have one enterprise as a client and that enterprise has multiple venues, you could also offer Unity as an interface for them where they can log into this platform and see what their venues look like and see what the equipment looks like in their venues as well. So here you saw floor one, but you essentially have every floor of the venue you could view as well. So various different use cases. think of if you're a larger enterprise and you have 20 different venues and you want to see what all those venues look like, or have an area where I could just log into the platform and see what's the latest technology that's deployed in these venues. And the last point I want to quickly highlight very quickly is you also have the ability of taking this data, analyzing it, and extrapolating all that data as well. So you could create as much insights as you want with the data at hand, and you could be creative of how you want to manipulate that data. And this data becomes even more useful when you combine your internal data, like we looked at in the beginning, with iBwave data as well. So you could be creative with the data you want to create. If you want to see a system integrator's performance, if you want to see how well the quality of your designs were with the certain equipment that you used, various different insights you can create. And it could also be something that's more actionable as well. So let's say, for example, I have a task of a rip and replace. Let's say I have an objective to swap out this specific access point, and I want to kind of rip it out everywhere that it's deployed. So this is another way you can manipulate that data. I could create this form, and it's essentially going to show me everywhere I have this access point, down to the geolocation, down to the floor, down to the address. So when it comes time to do a rip and replace, your job becomes a lot easier because you can see everywhere that's essentially deployed. So various different ways you could leverage these reports, end of life equipment search. Essentially, at the end of the day, you have the ability of being creative with that data that's at hand. And now the last point I want to make is all this data is also interoperable. So having that data interoperable allows you to take it into different platforms. So this is an example of, let me take my design data, let me take my outdoor data, and let me pull it into another platform. So this is a geospatial platform. So let's say you have your own internal tools that you want to pull this data into. You have the ability of doing so. And this is kind of an example of what it could look like. So you take your iBwave data, you pull it into a different interface. So think of different use cases. So let's say I want to see all my venues that I worked on in a campus for a specific enterprise, as an example. You could pull them all together, and you could pull in your coverage information, your equipment information, and you could start tying in your own internal database information as well. So let's say I had tower information, I could pull that in as well. If I had infrastructure information, really creating this holistic view of your network. So really taking iBwave data and really combining it with internal data as well. iBwave data being indoor data, being outdoor reach data, and maybe combining with tower data or fiber infrastructure data, just to give you that kind of holistic view. Now, again, this is a geospatial application, but again, if you're using SharePoint, if you're using OneDrive, if you have different tools like Salesforce that you want to pull in data to, we could accommodate for that with our APIs as well. And I promise this is my very last slide, but a lot of you have been hearing a lot about our iBwave Express platform. So it's essentially our ROM tool that allows you to do rough order of magnitudes. But think about how you could start off your process with a rough order of magnitude and flow into the process that I just showed you. So again, if you're in that preliminary stage where you're doing a rough order of magnitude, you want to get a quick bill of materials, you have abilities of doing smart zone predictions, automatic designs, making sure you have KPI compliancy, estimating various different technologies, whether it's LTE, Wi-Fi, small cell projects, and also the ability to visualize kind of real-time heat maps. So being able to start your project there and flow it into the process that I just showed you. So going from Express, pre-populating information, and then starting a more detailed design in iBwave. So iBwave Express can also flow into this workflow. So I believe I went a bit over time, and I want to make sure that I have enough time for questions. So I'll open it up for questions now. And Daniel, if you had anything you want to add, you could add it right now.
Thank you, Nathan. No, I just wanted to mention the request 30-day iBwave Unity free trial. So this is what you can utilize now by scanning the QR code, or if you want to learn more, just please scan the other QR code that you see below. For any follow-up questions, as Nazim mentioned before, please contact sales@iBwave.com. And Nazim, I don't know if you have access to the questions, but I see 2 questions here so far. Can you see them as well?
I'm not able to see, I see one question, but I'm not able to see the first one.
I can read
so one of the questions, yep.
Yeah, so Michael was asking if where is the data stored in the cloud?
Yeah, so good question. So the first question is where the data is stored in the cloud. So this is something that we accommodate different offerings for. So if you want to host it internally, we have an offering for that. If you want to host it on your own cloud environment, you can host it there. We also offer the ability of hosting it on your own dedicated cloud, or we also have the ability of hosting it on a multi-tenant environment, just to really make it accessible and cost-effective for anyone that wants to use this platform for their automation needs. So we really want to make this accessible for anyone, even if you're a single engineer. Make it accessible, because at the end of the day, it's a service that you could connect to and really leverage for automation. Even if you're just a surveyor, connecting to this cloud-based service allows you to really simplify your processes. So it's meant to be very accessible for whatever needs that you may have. Even if it becomes complex needs, we have ways to accommodate for that. Or even if it's a very simplistic need of just being able to connect to this service to leverage templates and for automation as well. So I see there's another question for using for neutral host deployments. So this is a very good question as well. So this can be used for neutral host, and this becomes very useful to have multiple different templates, because neutral host environments may have very specific templates, and it also may, it becomes very easy to accommodate for those neutral host deployments by having the right template that accommodates for everyone that essentially in the future may need to connect to that neutral host system. So I feel like this is a very useful tool for neutral hosts, because when it comes to neutral hosts, there's a lot of needs for standardization, making sure that you're using the right equipment that accommodates that everyone that may be involved in that network in the future as well.
All right, Nazim, I don't see any more questions now in the chat, but I would like to encourage you, if you have any last-minute questions, please feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I would like to say thank you, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Nazim, for this excellent presentation. And you will receive the recording within a day or 2. And if you have any follow-up question, please don't hesitate and reach out to sales or Nazim.
Yeah, absolutely. And one thing I'd like to mention is everything I showed you right now, it's very simple to get started. So essentially, even as a designer, you're going to get a URL. Essentially, you could mention what are these key custom fields that I want to leverage inside my automation. And then essentially, it's a very simple task to get started. And that's why we really encourage, if you want to really try out this platform, you could request a 30-day trial, and we'll help you get started with that process and really show you how simple it is to leverage the automation and these tasks that we showed in this demonstration.
All right, Nazim, I don't see any more questions.
Okay, perfect. So if anyone has any questions at all, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to sales@iBwave.com, and don't be shy. We'll get back to you as soon as we can, as soon as possible, and we look forward from hearing from you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Thanks, everyone.